Welcome back to another episode of Intuitive Guidance with Justin and Tor. This is the episode format where Justin and I use the tarot together to bring forth intuitive guidance where we cover different topics. We have covered, you can go back into the catalog and we can see that we have covered LGBT topics because we both identify as gay men, and we have looked at tools and practices and other things as well to support the community of intuitive seekers, is what I'm going to call it today. Justin and I met over a coffee at a cafe in London called Hazelnut? I always get it wrong. It's either hazelnut or another nut, but it wasn't almonds, nor was it cashews. I think it was hazelnut. And we gave each other a reading on the table, and I'm sure people must have thought we were incredibly wacky, but who cares? Welcome, Justin.
Thank you so much. Happy to be back.
Happy to have you back. You have just been journeying in Europe, haven't you?
Yes, I was 2 weeks in Sicily where I was part of a writing retreat specific to screenwriting for, what we used to call television and now just call series and or feature films. There was actually a couple of plays that were part of the
Mm.
time there as well. So that was fun to jump kind of from the different story formats and work with writers in that way. And part of what I did kind of after all the events was I opened it up a couple of days to people that wanted to have tarot readings. So I brought my deck,
Mm.
which had a lot of power in it, and I think some healing for the people that requested that to happen
Mm.
to them.
And you mentioned before we came along there was two cards that showed up quite a bit. What was the there was the Hangman and
The other one was the Empress, and the Hangman
Mm.
especially is really interesting because, from what I've been told, the depiction on like the Smith Rider deck is the figure upside down with the four kind of symbol and their legs being crossed over each other, and that was from a way that Italians, right, used to put
Mm.
people to death, and of course it's the card right before death, so it's like a preparation before that death card comes. And yet the figure in the card is very distinct
Ah.
and he's illuminated from behind as well. So it was kind of fascinating to have that be one of the cards in, you know, we'll say it this way, a part of Italy. So,
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the card in my deck. It's always like obviously gonna be like the last card that I pull or
yeah,
something.
of course.
I mean, nor do I use the original wide array, but it is pretty close to it. Will I find it or will I not find it? It is
You will.
interesting that it comes just before death, isn't it? Because, yeah, I've always looked at the Hangman as like a change card in many ways. Like, I do feel this
Sure.
change in that portal of that energy. On my card, this person is
Mhm.
hanging upside down. He's holding the thread. Yes, the legs are crossed. There is a halo
Yep.
behind them.
Yeah.
What did you say about the number four?
So the four, as you can tell in the figure, this is the Smith deck, which very
Oh,
similar.
yeah, yeah. It's very
So
similar, isn't it?
the number four is Jupiter, and Jupiter is all about expansion. And so we could say that in this state, the liminal state, kind of before the transformation and death, what is it that's expanding? Where is the focus? Which became a really powerful way to look at that card for the people as I was, reading for them, whatever their question was in Sicily, because where we put our energy is what expands, right? And so if that state is looked at as a fearful
Yeah.
one or one
And
of
then the
doubt,
Empress, yeah.
or then that's what expands, and it makes it harder, I think, to go through that transformation process of death if everything tied to it is something associated with a negative kind of energy.
Hmm. And how do you, 'cause this is my Empress card, which is quite different to the wide array, but lovely. How does your look? Do you have it? Do you have it? Do you have the Empress there?
I will find her. I just saw her, so let me grab her. actually kind of similar in the sense that there's the flowering on your card, there's growth on the card. So
Mm.
this is her in the Smith Rider deck.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. I suppose no, there are similarities. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Hmm. Um, but she's kind of like the Mother Earth, Mother Nature card of sorts of the tarot, the way that I see it. And it's about what are you giving birth to? There's a creative element, certainly with that, an abundance element with that. And then she has the symbol for Venus beside her. So there's a beauty kind of component to that card as well. And so um, even if the Hanged Man and Venus or the Empress didn't come up necessarily in the same reading, sometimes it did. The fact that those were the two cards that kept recurring over and over for multiple people over the course of 2 weeks was pretty interesting.
What planet do you have, or what sign do you have in Venus yourself? Do you know?
I think it's Scorpio because I have a stellium
Mm.
in Scorpio, and so I think that's where my Venus is, but don't quote me.
Mm. How does that show up in your, because Venus obviously is about femininity and love and sensuality, and how does that Scorpio, the depth of the Scorpio, show up in that way?
I think part of the reason the work that I do, whether it's with writers or artists of any kind, there is that depth of beauty that maybe I'm able to hold space for in a special way and working with other people. Um, if there's a shadow side at all that's ever shown up for that card, it's that I could be very hard on myself as it comes to what I interpret as my own physical beauty or lack of, as we just love to talk to ourselves and, negative language. And it is a process and work to remove those kind of things and allow ourselves to just be and not listen to those messages that want to bring us down.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, my Venus is in Virgo.
Mhm. So what does that mean for you? How does that show up?
Well, I was speaking to an astrologer once, and I said I can sometimes be a bit nitpicky with my partners, and she was like, "No, no, you're just somebody who holds attention to detail."
Hmm.
I was like, "That's really nice. Let's reframe it as that." Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I'm a very precise lover in that way. I do like things also to be like clear and upfront. And it's probably like the shadow side is sometimes this level of like control and perfectionism, right? And perhaps standards that are occasionally unachievable. But on the flip side, it is also somebody who's very clear and tender and communicative. And so, yeah, you have to live with both of those two aspects, basically. Yeah.
Do you demand that level of a certain kind of perfection for yourself? So then do you demand it in other people, or do you find that
Well,
it's
it's really
easier to
interesting.
demand that of others? Yeah.
I demand it of myself,
Hmm.
but, um, and it's interesting that this high expectation doesn't really show up anywhere else than from my partner.
Hmm.
Right? So like I don't have high expectations really of my friends or my clients. Like they're just on their journey, whilst the person that I choose to be my partner, because that's an important thing, right? That's probably at least in the past, and probably it's still a bit, is that's where the expectation dial gets turned up slightly. That's where it sort of shows up in that way. Hmm.
I would assume, but you correct me if I'm wrong, that it's more if the partner then welcomes that
Yeah.
nitpickiness or whether they see it as like an assault on themselves, like you're undermining them in some way.
Well, that's where healthy communication comes into the picture, being very communicative about the experience that we go through.
Right.
So, we have stepped down a bit of an astrology route, and we're still gonna, which we've done in the past, and we're gonna do it slightly again. So, we were going to speak about healing and alignment, which we still are, but we are going to attach it to something as we were
Hmm.
speaking, because Uranus is moving from Taurus to Gemini at the end of this month, which only
Mhm.
happens every 84th year.
Wow.
And so I think there's something about healing and alignment as we transition through this moment.
Hmm.
How does that sound?
I love that. And, to be clear, this is April 2026 as this is being recorded. And with what you just said, that means most likely, pending some medical breakthrough, you and I probably won't see this happen again in our lifetime, which is a big thing. That's
Yeah,
really
it's a big
interesting.
thing. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, that would have to be some serious medical miracle if we are living again in, or still around in 84 years where this happens again, basically.
I don't know, Tor. You're only years old, so it could happen.
I have somebody told me the other day, oh, surely, unless you have drunk from the fountain of youth, you still can't be in your 30s. I was like, you are so kind. Thank you. I
There we go.
appreciate it. But I mean, I do have good skin though, right? I mean, I think I do look somewhat young, which
So,
is great.
ladies and gentlemen, Tor is a Leo, if you didn't guess that. So, yeah. Yes, you do. There you go. That's the only compliment you get today.
Yes, Tor is a Leo. And my rising is Libra,
There you
which also is about beauty and pleasure and all that kind of stuff. Maybe my moon is Aquarius is less so, but of course the Leo is, which is this gift that my friend gave me, which is the sun, which is ruled by the sun. It's I can't help it.
Yeah, we know. We know.
But I try to do it with some level of humility, right? Some level of humility, which is funny. So, what we're doing, we are pulling two cards each on healing and alignment advice and guidance as Taurus is moving from, not Taurus, as Uranus is moving from Taurus to Gemini.
Great.
I'm gonna have to admit that I don't actually know do you know much about Uranus and sort of what it represents?
I know that there's a little bit of a chaotic element to it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the rebel planet in a lot of ways, and
Yes.
it doesn't mean negative, but it's there to kind of mess with things and kind of see, where in life things are, really working to our best or where it needs like a little bit of a shakeup. So it can be a little bit of a challenging energy to deal with depending on where it falls. How would you say that says something interesting as far as it moving into Gemini, which is of course the twins and that
Yeah.
kind of dualism?
Yeah, so of course you're moving from Taurus to Gemini. Taurus is an earth sign, Gemini is an air sign. What people also have to be aware of is that you have to be aware of which house,
Yeah.
which obviously we can't tell you, which is where the individuality comes in. It like comes in like the degree and the houses will influence how this impacts everybody collectively. That's where the uniqueness and individuality comes in.
Right.
I think I'm either moving from house 9 to 10 or 10 to 11. I just
Hmm.
know that the energy of the house that I'm moving into is all about discovery, basically, and expansion. So there's a huge sort of discovery and expansion attached to the Gemini. And I mean, my partner is a Gemini, or is he a Gemini? Full of life, life of the party, always out, talking, stuff is happening, stuff is always moving, nothing is ever quiet. Um, I mean, he rises into Cancer and his moon is Capricorn, which kind of, there are
Hmm.
spaces where that Gemini energy has to rest, basically. It does need to rest, which is important, but I do find that, the Taurus is like my experience of them is like heads down, getting the work done, like not looking at anything else. It's like, this is what I need to do, and I forget everything else. Whilst a Gemini is like, oh, look at this flower. It smells nice. Can I go to America tomorrow? Like, do I have to get a visa? No, I'll just book a ticket. Like, it's a bit more impulsive.
Hmm.
It has a more impulsive, expansive, let's explore everything right now kind of energy to it. So it's a bit less directed in that way, I suppose, but it's also very curious and open and like a lover of life kind of energy in my experience. Of course, there is this sort of two-facedness in Geminis, but I haven't really experienced that much because I have quite a few Geminis in my life actually. And I personally haven't experienced that so much.
Sure. But that can be a positive in the sense of like looking at things from different angles and different
Yeah.
sides. Um, it can also be a car or a sign that draws us toward that integration of anything that, we don't love, but need to embrace to be whole. Um, so yeah, that's interesting with a rebel planet of sorts moving into that
Mm.
state for a long period of time.
Yeah, because I mean, my maths are not great, but if it's every 84 year, does that mean that it's 12 years? No, it can't
Uh,
be, because 12
that's not
times
12, right? Yeah, it would be
7, right?
7 years. Yeah.
Which is quite something.
Absolutely.
Seven, 7 years in Gemini.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be intense for all of us.
Yeah, it'll definitely show up in a variety of different ways. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But it feels
shaking
like
things
there's
up.
a little more freedom in Gemini than there might be in Taurus, which, because it's Earth and it wants to charge and it's the bull and all of that, might have been a harder sign to, uh, for lack of a better word, control that energy of Uranus, which doesn't want to be controlled or harnessed.
Hmm.
So that's interesting too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, let's pull 2 cards each on guidance on healing and alignment in this energy of Uranus from Taurus to Gemini.
Love it. So I have my two where normally, if you've seen our videos in the past, I would have Tor choose the cards. But in this case, one card just leaped out, and so I'm going to take it. And then the other one was like intuitive, like pick me, pick me. So I have my two when you're ready with
It's
yours.
so funny because I was gonna say you gotta pick your own 2 cards today.
There you go. Alignment already.
Alignment already. So what are your 2 cards?
So the first one is the Seven of Pentacles.
Hmm. And how
Yeah.
do you interpret that?
Well, I think it's a card of natural pause to look at the what we're manifesting, what we're building toward, what we're where our physical self is, and that can also include, of course, our money. Um, it's like, where the energy goes, that's what expands, that's what shows up. And so this is in a practical and physical sense. So it's taking an evaluation of an appreciation for what's been growing, but it's also a point of decision of like, do I want to continue on this path and in this space of where it seems to be headed or not? So it can be a beautiful kind of pivot point as well as acknowledgement that yes, I'm putting my energies and my efforts and what's coming out in a physical sense towards something that's positive both for me and for the collective because we're certainly not alone. So I
Hmm.
like that card for all of those reasons. How about for you? Any
Hmm.
other thoughts about Seven of Pentacles?
Show it to me again.
Hmm.
Yeah, because he's standing there looking at what he has grown so far, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's a feeling of what's on the horizon. I
Hmm.
mean, 7 is obviously a very positive number as well. Um, Pentacles, not always about money, but it's also about resources and home life. And it's interesting. I was with a client this morning and I said something to them around like, you need to pause to recognize actually, yes, you might be in a situation right now where you are not satisfied, you don't feel in alignment, but it's important that you recognize how much you've built already anyway, like how far you've come.
Mhm.
Yes, this
Yeah,
moment in time might be far from ideal, but at the same time, you can't disregard all of the experience that you've had so far, right?
right.
And like show some gratitude towards that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
beautifully said. It's not about staying in the moment too long. It's also not about looking to the past, but it's about appreciating what was, whether we perceive that as being, to your point, to your client, good, difficult, bad, whatever. Um, and then just making the decision in the moment again, where do we want to put that energy now? With that
Yeah,
kind of
and
awareness and gratitude. Yeah.
yeah, and thinking about that seven, because of course again the Pentacles is an earth card, earth sign, and earth element. And then we're moving into Gemini, which is air, and we've got that seven, and it's around for 7 years. That's interesting. And so I guess there is in the Seven of Pentacles, then there is sort of like a shake up kind of energy, right? Recognize what's been there and what are we building next, and how might we want to approach stuff, resources, physical resources, the body, the mind, the body, not so much the mind, but the body, our home life differently, right? What can we expand?
Yeah, and if it was, a pentacle for each year, like what are you moving toward this year versus next, etc. Over the
Hmm.
course that Uranus is in this space and wants to maybe challenge or disrupt or show you something new. That's pretty profound, I think.
Yeah, I think that disruption energy is important, right? Like, what are you prepared to disrupt a bit, shake
Yeah,
up, basically?
right.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. What
Great.
is your first card?
Well, we're clearly in sync, sort of, because my first card is the Five of Pentacles reversed.
Nice. And
And
how do you interpret that?
how does one interpret that? Pondering and considering the question that we asked and the element that we are moving into. I mean, when I pull this card for people and it is upright, the advice that I usually give in this moment, given that moment, is that, it's really important that whatever it is that you're going through that you may find difficult, is that you don't go about doing this by yourself.
Hmm.
Ask for help,
Wow. Yeah.
you know, ask for help. People are willing to help if you ask for it.
Hmm.
That's the advice that I often, because I often find that when I pull the five of coins for people, they are in a difficult situation, right? That's usually, it's not always, but usually that's what shows up. And it's often about, and they're then somebody who typically wouldn't ask for help and like want to white knuckle it and go at them themselves. It's like, no, stop that. Ask for help. It's interesting though, with thinking about the energy shift, and because I think within the five of coins upright, there's also like a feeling of safety, right? Or lack thereof. And
Yeah.
so I think thinking about that journey that we're stepping into is like what you perhaps felt were safe in the past will no longer be so. And so it is important that as a part of your healing and alignment with Taurus and Gemini in Uranus, it's embracing that what you may have felt was safe in the past will no longer be so, but you will again find what feels safe.
Hmm.
That is a word salad, but I know what I said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what that boils down to is trust and faith that, that you are going to be safe, that you are going to be secure, that you will
Yeah.
have needs met and not being in a lack mindset because again, what, we're thinking about and putting our energy into is what's going to expand and why would you want to expand lack? And it is asking for help if needed. It's looking outside of yourself in a certain way, whether that's to what we might call the divine and or to others. Fives are contractions, so it's going within, and that can be really hard. But with it reversed, I think it's a lighter form of that than maybe it might have been if it was upright as well. That's how it intuitively kind of hit me. So it's about that trust that I don't know what's around the corner or where I'm building or what I'm walking into, but I know that I've always made it through and I'll make it through whatever that is, and it will actually be for my good.
Yeah, there's also absolutely all of that. It's also, just as you were talking, it's also about releasing victim mindset, right?
For
That's
sure.
also what has to be, that is the healing in alignment, is to release any forms of victim mindset, right?
Right.
Of course, there are problems that are systemic, right? Even so, at the end of the day, we have to live our life and do the most that we can do with the resources that we have, basically.
Mhm.
And if and when we fall into a victim mindset, that doesn't help anyone, especially not yourself, right?
No.
And so, if and when we can release that victim mindset and ask for help, that is what is needed in this moment, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And the tarot never ignores what has happened in the past or is
Mm,
going on in the present, but it does absolutely acknowledge it and then encourage, to your point, not to stay there.
mm,
We get a lot of energy, but it's not real energy that's sustainable from being victims. Oh, tell me more, your sob story of what happened. And instead of it being empowering and maybe helping others, it becomes a thing that we keep looking to for that little woo charge instead of again
mm.
the fulfilling charge of letting that go and moving beyond it and saying I'm not a victim to that circumstance or that thing that happened or those words that were said or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. What's your second card, Justin?
It is the Knight of Swords, so an air card, which
Oof,
is cool.
oof.
Yeah, and
That,
I think
that is very cool.
there's a lot of healing, I think, that and alignment to be had in the Knight of Swords at this moment that, Uranus is moving into Gemini. So it's taking command of our communication. And that's not just to others, it's how we talk to ourselves, right?
Yeah,
You were both talking about that a little bit before we got on, and now it's coming up kind of again, that self-talk is just as important as, again, what goes outward into the world, whether that's through our
yeah.
emails or our whatever form it takes, videos, communications like this, one-on-one conversations or group conversations, how we present ourselves really in terms of thought and communication. And it's fast, it's moving fast, and it's grabbing onto that and allowing that to happen in ways that are expansive and positive.
Grabbing it by the horns, basically, and
Hmm?
allowing that air to
Yeah.
charge you forward.
It's funny because if you look really closely at the horse's face, the way Pamela Coleman Smith drew it, it's like the horse is looking back going, "Are you sure?" And
Yeah,
we're sure.
for sure. I love that. And I love that both of us have moved. Like, 'cause obviously you had a Pentacles card, I had a Pentacle card. You now had an air card because swords are air. And the second card that I have, which is kind of balancing yours in a way, it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely all of that.
And yeah.
And I have pulled Justice upright,
Oh, that's great.
which I just checked 'cause I didn't know. I couldn't remember. But apparently, Justice is Libra. And
Hmm.
Libra, of course, is also an air sign, right?
Nice.
Together with Gemini. So we both moved from earth to air in the aspects of our cards, which I think is really, really, really interesting. And so I do think, though, that so Justice, she holds the swords of justice and she also holds the scales of
Mhm.
justice, right? And she sits there on her throne, or I don't know if it's a throne, what would you call it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and sort of casting judgment, right? I mean, it's not the judgment card, but she is still, in a way, casting judgment, right? But I think, excuse me, it's interesting with this card because the lady who's sitting there kind of has her eyes glazed over,
Oh, interesting.
which is interesting, which means that she's also looking inwards whilst she is
Mm.
holding the swords of justice and holding the scales of justice, which tells me that there is a spiritual element to how she casts that justice, right?
Yeah, well said.
And I suppose then, as we are moving into this new 7 year cycle, it's like, how are we making sure that we are orienting ourselves from that more intuitive spiritual space, right? I think that's also what the card here is asking for.
Yeah, and I think it ties into our Pentacles cards of reflection. And, to your point, I love what you said about going inward. And look, the Knight of Swords could just be going, going, going almost in haste, whereas Justice comes in and says, let's wait a second. Like make sure we have all the facts and or checked in with ourselves before we speak sometimes, right? Or
Which
before we
is which I mean, sorry for interrupting, but which is interesting with sort of the two-faced element of the Gemini, right? Because there will be one part which is like, let's go. And there's the
right.
other side which is like, let's go, but slightly slower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
an energy that we're going to have to navigate as we step into this energy of Gemini.
Yeah, there's a sense of balance that's there per the Libra, per the scales of justice.
Mm,
Um, and that can be in the form of giving and receiving. It can be the form of, yes, I have something that I need to say or want to say, but also then listening and
mm,
responding and maybe not being the first to open your mouth in a certain situation.
mm. Interesting. I love how aligned our cards were today, as they so often are. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm kind of excited by this because it's in my natal chart. There's lots of change happening this year. Also, my Leo is coming back to Jupiter, which is Leo's home planet,
right,
which is going to be interesting and to see how yeah, see how that manifests in the earthly realm.
right. I'd be remiss not to mention too that in Chinese astrology, right, it's the fire horse here, and here we have
Oh
a
yeah.
horse that, basically had a fire started under them, so to speak, and is charging forwards.
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
fast-moving, big energy, both for yourself and then for the collective as well.
Yeah. I mean, something I'm really practicing right now is that, often in the spiritual space, I do feel like we sometimes have a tendency to only lean towards pleasure and goodness, and then everything that is aligned is supposed to feel good and proper and correct. Whilst that's just not an expansive version enough of reality, because as we know, sometimes we are in the darkest depths of our mind, and that's also part of the spiritual experience. And so, like a mantra that I am sort of practicing and cultivating is that the experience is the experience.
Yeah,
I don't have to label it as good or bad. It is just the experience.
yeah. And that has everything to do with being present because you don't
Yes.
know, you know it came before, but it doesn't matter in the sense of today. You don't know
Yeah.
what's coming. Even with the best planning, we don't know. So.
We have no idea. So the experience is just the experience, and the experience is happening and it's unfolding. So get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a great spiritual teacher talk about that in terms of weather, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
weather's
sure.
the weather, you know, prepare for it, sure. Be aware of it, yes. but the weather's the weather.
The
You didn't
weather is the
cause it
weather.
by something you did or it didn't do or whatever. It just
Yeah, yeah,
is.
yeah. It just is. The experience just is. The weather just is. Exactly, yeah. Because that's a Buddhist thing, isn't it? With the blue sky and the weather and the thing. Yeah, yeah. I think it's such an important thing to remind oneself of because I think, yeah, we can sometimes label experiences as good and bad. And of course, if you're currently living in the rubble of Gaza, it is bad, right? But I think that, if you're living in a city like London or Las Vegas or other things, it's like there's certain, I think we can sometimes over label things and we could just have to get back to that thing where the experience is the experience, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm not, what I'm about to say, I'm not correcting you. I'm saying this for
Sure.
all of us. But instead of good and bad, I wonder if we could label it, it's difficult right now, because that is true,
That is true.
in Gaza. But I don't know that it means it's necessarily bad. Um,
Fair.
Difficult can have multiple levels, and I'm not minimizing anyone's experience, including
Hmm.
my own tomorrow or yesterday or whatever it
Hmm.
might be. But I'm more conscious of how important words are, and
Sure.
I'm trying to consciously, if I'm going to label something or give it an adjective or a descriptor, that
Hmm.
it's less giving power to something that doesn't belong there. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. No, no, I think words are really interesting. I am experimenting with using like some Norse chants in my singing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting to sing them in my sessions and or perform them in my sessions and see how that like adds to the experience, basically.
Do you find because of where you're originally from, etc., does that tie into like a deep part of yourself that maybe you didn't have the same kind of access to, or how is it coming up for you that it's a
I
Norse
think
chant, for
so.
example?
I
Yeah,
think so. I do think it activates something within me because of my heritage, obviously being a Norwegian and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't pinpoint it, but it does feel like it's doing something, you know? Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
like it.
love and maybe that's just a nice little thing for the Seven of Pentacles of like going back to our roots, and maybe we're finding something wonderful there, whether that's a chant or a poem or a mantra or
Mm,
whatever it might be.
mm. So to close, any final wise words, Justin, or have we co-created enough wisdom as it is?
I think the wisdom of the tarot and the alignment that showed when we're asking about cards for alignment and healing is really beautiful. And at any point, there's healing that's available, and I think that would be the last kind of message that I would want to share, that even in the darkest of darkness, there can be healing and there can be light that can shine. It doesn't
Mm.
mean it's easy. And I don't, again, I'm not minimizing anyone's experience. But it is available if we ask.
It is available if we ask. And there is something beautiful when you are able to find joy in the most difficult of situations. Like, yeah, which is obviously very impressive if you are in a severely difficult situation. Yeah. And, it's like I wrote something about something, and, I think there's such strength in people who do not become bitter from going through
Yes.
a difficult experience, right? I love that.
Yeah, because here's the thing, for most of us, we didn't have control over the situation. The people in Gaza, for example, didn't choose that, and they're not being
Mm,
punished. It has nothing to do with anything like that that other
mm,
people might want to throw at it. But because you're in that moment, the one thing you do have control or responsibility for is your outlook and your attitude. And so
mm,
if you come through that with bitterness and hate and all of those other things, then that's what you're going to breed more of. Um,
mm,
and so it doesn't mean that it's easy in the least, but collectively, can we rise above maybe even our instinct to want to hate back or seek revenge or
mm,
whatever it might be?
mm. Well, thank you for your wisdom as always, Justin, and a pleasure. Thank you for everybody who listened. If you enjoy this, if it resonated, hit that like button, subscribe button, and we will see you again here sometime soon. Thank you so much. Bye,
Beautiful.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.